What's going on, guys? MurderInc here, back with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today I want to talk about the popular topic that's been coming up over and over again, Leech and the clan boss. As you know, Leech was changed and increased to 18% effect. So now everyone wants to know, can I run this in the clan boss? Is this efficient for me? So here I want to talk to you today about my thoughts on it, giving you the information you need to know, help you better understand how Leech can successfully work in a clan boss environment, and to see if this is the right approach for you to save you the most amount of resources possible. First thing I want to do is I want to say a huge thank you to everyone on Twitch. I did my first live streaming theory crafting session where I made this pretty much scribble notepad we see here to the right, full of text that I'm going to go over as I'm talking. It was awesome to get input live from the community and show them how I go through my theory crafting process and how I come up with all of the findings that I do have on all of my previous subjects, including this one. Without wasting any time, let's get right into the Leech discussion. As we can see, Leech 18% is not equivalent to 30% of Lifesteal, that we know. So what I did was I said, let's take a look at a basic healthy Ultra Nightmare team. 40 to 45,000 health, which is pretty much ideal and what you want to aim for an Ultra Nightmare team throughout all 5 members. So the first thing I asked people to do is I said, okay, Ultra Nightmare, counterattack team, very common setup. What are your champions hitting for raw damage wise? This is really important. Yes, Leech does apply to mastery procs. However, if you really want to find solid information, you cannot use something that's RNG based, especially if you're looking to see how your survivability will be while using Leech. As we can see here, we have 20,000 on a 3 hit, 170k on a 1 hit, 70k 1 hit, 60k on a 1 hit, 10,000 1 hit, 10,000 on a 4 hit, and 18,000 on a 1 hit. So here I calculated how much healing it's going to do per hit and how much healing it's going to do total, keeping in mind that the total health pool of a champion should be between 40 to 45,000. The conclusion we found from this brief example where I got these damage numbers, I simply asked Twitch chat, I said, how hard are your champions hitting? Throw out some numbers, tell me the champion. We had Folly, we had Alton, we had Skull Crusher, a bunch of different champions like that. So that's where I got those from. The conclusion was Leech is not enough without mastery or a support healer on its own. Now there are some nuances to that. We will go over that later. That's what we have for now. The next point we have here is damage per minute to survivability. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a very long time. This is probably the most advanced form of how to formulate a clan boss team. It was really hard to explain before. Thankfully, now that we have Leech here, it's going to be much easier for me to explain it to you, help you increase your clan boss team, whether you're using Leech, whether you're not using Leech and using Lifesteal. Whatever you're doing, this will help you out a ton. Damage per minute to survivability, shortened to DPM. This is the most important thing you should be looking at when building a clan boss team. My example here is as follows. If you have 5,000 defense and 20% crit, and you're doing 3 million damage per minute for 7 minutes, that's 21 million damage. Now let's say you shifted that. So now you shift that to 3.5 thousand damage, 100% crit, 200% crit damage. Now you're doing 9.8 million damage per minute for 5 minutes. So you died 2 minutes earlier. You're losing all of those additional rounds of damage. And now you're doing 49 million damage a key in 5 minutes. This is very key here, and this is something that I think it's really important for every single player to understand when building a clan boss team. In short, what this is saying is it's not the best idea to just build your team as tanky as possible and say, I'm going to have poisons up for longer, I'm going to have defense down and weaken up for longer, I'm going to get more mastery procs. That is not the appropriate way to approach the clan boss. And now with Leech, we are going to be able to see exactly why that's the case. Now let's look at our first example. With Leech on a damage team with a healer support champion compared to Lifesteal. If you aren't using Lifesteal gear, it's more likely than not, this can be applied to probably 95% of players. You will have better stats, whether you can mix and match gear, simply use speed sets, crit damage sets, crit rate sets, immortal sets, cruel, any set you can think of. It's very likely you will be able to give your champions a lot better than would be possible with having to use 4 pieces of lifesteal gear. On top of that, you will have faster clan boss times. This means that if you were doing 30 million damage in 11 minutes, 12 minutes, now you can shift that down to doing 30 million damage in 7 minutes or 8 minutes, something along those lines. Now, the final point you really have to consider is the healer support going to be able to compare to the bonus of you not wearing lifesteal gear? That's very important. So if you have Leech from any champion and you're adding a healer support onto your team, does the lower damage of that healer as opposed to who you would normally run give you an advantage or a disadvantage in the overall key? So these are all things you definitely have to consider if you want to use a damage based team with the healer support. Another thing, think about, a lot of people have Skull Crusher. Higher damage per minute penalizes Skull Crusher significantly. When you're stacking better damage on your champions, not going as much for survivability, you're improving their overall stats, you will be taking more damage quicker and earlier into the fight. So the more damage he takes, you could get terrible RNG, get crit, Skull Crusher could die, and it could end up being not beneficial for you. Especially keeping in mind that with Leech, Skull Crusher outside of Mastery procs will not have the same power to fully heal like he did with Lifesteal gear. How do we counteract this? What's the best option? What I came up with is, if you have 5 Lifesteal sets, now you have the opportunity to build 1 super set. You can take the best stats from all 5 champions you were having, whether they were attack based, health based, defense based, put them all onto Skull Crusher. Now what should you be looking for? In my opinion, you should be looking for at least 60,000 health, 3.5 to 4,000 defense, 85% crit rate or higher. Now if you decide to build them strictly tanky and not worry about crit, now you're adding a healer to the team, which can further boost Skull Crusher's survivability, giving you more success overall. Now let's talk about healer support champion. How do you pick one for your team? Which one is going to be the best? What I would recommend from looking at this whole Leech strategy is build your healer support full damage. Get as much damage as you possibly can out of them while not completely building them a glass cannon. So if you're a bad L, you're going to build 100% crit and accuracy. Doesn't need raw damage since his poisons are the raw damage, so that doesn't really matter for him. Manaya, really high multipliers, definitely has insane raw damage, so she's definitely a very high threshold champion for the amount of damage she can do. Doom Priest, another fantastic epic, has the ability to cleanse, which is really strong, whether it's the stun or the affinities under 50%, has very high raw damage due to her high attack multiplier. So now let's take a look at the best Leech champions and what they can do for your team. First champion I want to look at is Yannicka. In my opinion, she is the best Leech champion you could possibly use on any of your teams if you are considering this strategy. She offers a 50% chance of applying the Leech debuff for 2 turns from her A1. Her A2 places a perfect Veil buff on the champion. As we know, Veil was just changed, so that reduces the damage taken. Obviously, you'd have to build 100% crit on her. She has very high damage possibilities, so there's just a ton of things that add up for Yannicka, making her so strong. Increased survivability with the perfect Veil buff. Very consistent A1 application of Leech. Downside to Yannicka is that she does get an extra turn in her rotation. She would have to be speed tuned if you are using a counterattack champion to always use the A2 outside of counterattack being applied, or use someone like Sandlash Survivor, Lanakiss, Krisk, Flesh Tear, anyone who really increases the duration of buffs on the champion, making it so she can burn a charge from her A2 to her A3 or back to the A1, and she will still have the counterattack buff on herself. Now the penalty for this isn't as huge as it would be on another champion because she is applying that perfect Veil buff on herself. The next champion that I would like to talk about for Leech is Mashald, aka My Salad. I did just do a rework champion spotlight, so if you want to know more in depth about his kit, definitely check that video out. For now, we're simply going to go over the fact that his A1 offers a heal outside of Leech, so Leech is just an added bonus here. Where his strength comes is on a 2-turn cooldown. Once this is fully booked, he has the ability to apply Leech. As we know, Leech lasts for 2 turns, so having this on a 2-turn cooldown definitely makes this consistent. Granted, it never gets resisted. So that's a key point there, never gets resisted. This is one of the major RNG parts about any type of Leech composition you are trying to attempt. If you don't, add a recommended healer support champion or follow some of the teams I recommend below. If Leech is resisted, your team is pretty much in trouble. You're going to be relying on any buffs your champion has, like a defense up, ally protect, anything like that, to keep them alive long enough for Leech to be reapplied and let them start healing again. Michaud, just like Yannicka, has fantastic damage multipliers. He will be doing an insane amount of damage. The next champion that I want to talk about is Folly. He does provide a Leech debuff. He has very high base stats, 15,000 health, just like Yannicka has, 1100 defense, more than Yannicka, 105 speed, more than Yannicka. So this is all very good. His damage multipliers are not very high. He will not be hitting as hard. His benefit is he has a 4 hit on his A1 and a 4 hit on his A2. So this is like a Giant Slayer dream right here as far as the amount of mastery damage he can provide for your team. He also has a defense down on his A1, which can be very helpful to your team. And Leech is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. It only applies for 2 turns, so he would definitely be best served in some type of speed team where he is overlapping the Demon Lord's turns to make sure this is always up. Unfortunately, as mentioned before, if this is resisted just once, your team is left pretty much unprotected unless you have some type of other mechanic that can help you. The only problem I see with Folly personally is if he does get stunned, he will boost his turn meter. He will immediately remove the stun effect from himself. However, that boosted turn meter effect can definitely mess up the synergy of your entire team. So this is something to consider. If you are going to use Folly, build him so he will never get stunned in whatever team you are running. Now that we've gone over the 3 pretty commonly known champions, let's go over someone who isn't as talked about and talk about her viability. Teela Gormain. Everyone called her a vault champion for the longest time. Let's get into it. Is she still considered a vault champion? Let's find out right here. So she has an A1 that has a chance to steal a random buff from the target. Off of first glance, this doesn't seem as good. However, under 50%, she does have the opportunity to steal that attack up buff that can end your run early if it stays on the boss. So this is already looking promising for that specific situation. The A2 is very interesting. We have places an HP burn debuff for 2 turns, places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns if this is critical. This cooldown is not reduced when it's booked. So let's talk about this really quick. First thing we said was if you want to run a Leech champion, get the most value out of your team, it is best paired with some type of support healer. With Teela Gormain, we actually have a 2-in-1 HP burn, HP based champion, so you can definitely build lots of survivability here. Continuous heal on every champion for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown, and as we can see, applies Leech as well on a 4-turn cooldown. Overall, in my opinion, she's definitely a strong champion if you want to use her in some type of speed team for the Leech composition. Now let's talk about something that definitely applies to Leech teams, but also applies to any speed team in general. This is definitely a very good tip for everyone to know. If you are running a debuffer that is a burst poisoner like a Dracomorph, Eothar, Tomb Lord, do not build them fast. If you build them too fast, they have the potential of overwriting an attack down buff, filling the boss with way too many debuffs, and it can end up wiping your team much earlier than you anticipated, making the RNG for the team not viable to use in the content you're looking for. Definitely keep this in mind if you're building a team. This can save you tons of resources when you're trying to figure out which champions you should and should not use. Now goes to the biggest question, what is the strongest Leech team? In my opinion, the strongest Leech team you could possibly make is Valk, Alton, Lanakis, Michaud, and Dracomorph. Now one thing to note about a team like this, Leech unfortunately doesn't do a lot. As much as I hate to say it, anyone who has Valk knows how powerful her HP shield is, and outside of someone that's taking the stun, healing themselves up, Leech really isn't needed until the way later rounds, and usually if the clan boss is one-shotting the shield on the first wave, they are going to one-shot your team on the second wave unless you have another crazy cooldown up, like a defense up, strengthen, something like that. So while Leech is definitely very effective in this team, what this does is it lets you build the entire team less tanky, so now Valk's shield isn't as big, and you can focus purely on damage for Michaud, Dracomorph, even Lanakis. Lanakis, While Leech is good, she doesn't need it because she does apply a continuous heal to herself when she crits. That is an added bonus to her. Alton hits incredibly hard, so it's very easy for him to sacrifice some survivability and build straight damage for this champion that he will be able to full heal every single time from a Leech debuff. Another awesome synergy this team has, as we know, Lanicus does extend the duration of buffs. So if you did want to build this strongest Leech team, in my opinion, faster than the clan boss, you can absolutely do that. You can get more teams for yourself. You're adding an ally attack. Lanicus does have a turn meter boost on top of things, which will also extend Valk's counterattack and shield on all of your players, as well as the speed buff Mashald provides your team. So instead of using 5 legendaries, what else can we do? Skull Crusher, Sepulture, Sandlash Survivor, or a Poisoner, Yannicka, and Razin. Another type of Leech team you can run is called a fast Leech team. It's kind of like the God comp. You're going to run a Martyr for a defense down and attack down. This will work because you're going to make them fast enough for the attack down to, on a cooldown, always be up on the boss. Granted, it doesn't get resisted. You will have Arbiter for the heal, revive, and weaken. You will have your Leech champion, which will equal the sustained heals plus damage. The 4th slot is going to be a Poisoner, which is going to be your sustained damage. And the 5th slot is going to be a raw damage dealer. So someone like a Razin, Turvold, Krutraxa, so on and so forth. This is going to be the non-consistent high damage, probably carrying the entire team and really doing the most amount of damage on the team. So this is definitely another team you can run. There are thousands of different options of champions you can put in all of these slots, pretty much outside of Martyr, which is a pretty specific role. So if you don't have a Martyr, I don't suggest attempting to run this type of team unless you want to drop your counterattack altogether. Then absolutely swap in a defense down, attack down champion where Martyr is and just plug and play. I thought a lot about each role in this team, and if you can build them right based on the information I've already given you in this video, this will be a consistent clan boss team for you. Next, we have a slow burn Leech team. So this is using the 1st slot as a damage reduction champion like Duchess and Norog, 2nd slot as a Poisoner, giving you sustained damage, the 3rd an attack down, plus another benefit, meaning a Coffin Smasher, giving you the attack down, Giant Slayer, and HP burn, Alton giving you attack down and defense up, Tyrell giving you attack down and defense down. We all know what Sepulture does. Jareg giving you the ally protection. For the 4th slot, we have a utility buff fill. This means anything you couldn't achieve with slot 1, 2, or 3, you can insert them into slot 4, meaning an attack down, defense down, or a weakened champion. Number 5, a healer with damage dealing capabilities. So this, in my opinion, rounds off the slow burn Leech team. The next comp we have is a fast Leech revive version. So on number 1 slot, we have the Leech champion. Number 2, we have a turn meter boost, revive, or a revive only champion. Someone like a Cardinal, as I listed here, is solid since she does have a poison in her kit. As we can see here, her A1, even though it's only a 20% chance at a 5% poison for 2 turns, this is going to proc regardless of how low the chance is, and the poison damage will add up over time. For the 3rd slot here, we have an attack down. The 4th, another utility fill roll, defense down, weaken. Number 5, a Poisoner or a raw damage dealer. Now, probably the most common composition people are going to be looking at and asking questions about: a normal counterattack clan boss team with no lifesteal. So for number 1, we have your counterattack champion. Number 2, we have the Leech champion being 100% uptime Leech. If it's not 100% uptime, I highly recommend you using someone like a Valk Warlord, ally protection from any champion, or a defense up. Number 3, we have a debuffer, defense down, and or weaken. Number 4, we have the attack down plus anything else that that champion can offer you. And number 5, we have a Poisoner. In my opinion, if you attempted to take your normal clan boss counterattack team, take Lifesteal off, add a Leech champion, this is going to be the hardest to calculate and make a solid damage per minute adjustment to, based on how different these two teams are. 12% may not seem like a lot, but as shown above, it makes you extremely reliant on mastery procs to fully heal yourself, where you weren't using a healer before. Always remember this when trying to calculate a team: RNG is not going to be in your favor. Never say, I'm going to hope that I get masteries to heal me up for 90% of the fight. Always play the negative when trying to theory craft. This will give you the best results overall. Now we get to another in my opinion part. If you are doing 26 million per key or more, do not try to use a Leech team. You will save a ton of resources and not having to reinvest in different champions. If it's what you want to do and it'll bring you some excitement into the game, 100% go for it. If you're strictly looking to min-max your team, in my opinion, once again, Leech is not the way to go. What you should be doing is you should really look to maximize your damage per minute efficiency instead. That, from what I've told you so far, is definitely a better use of your resources and is much easier since you already have all the champions geared, and all you have to do is really swap gear around, swap stats around, and play with the results there instead of introducing brand new champions, having to invest books in them, mastery them, so on and so forth. Another thing to note about Leech, Leech will give you the largest damage thresholds of all of the teams. So what this means is if you're averaging 28 million per key using a Leech team, this can mean you can get 16 million or 36 million. That is a 20 million damage threshold per key, which is gigantic. So if you're willing to increase your clan boss damage by 5-6 million damage, but you're also willing to go as low as 16 million damage per key, this is definitely something you should consider since it is so reliant on RNG and mastery procs, unless you have a well-rounded team as listed above. For non-Leech teams, we've all been running it for a long time, so we know it. I used an example here of someone from chat. They had a consistent 11 million threshold from their team, going from 21 to 32 million based on their procs. Champions have a huge role in all of this information, so definitely keep that in mind when reading into this. Overall, Leech is good with high damage if you want to compare it to Lifesteal. You have a Dracomorph like I do who's critting for 300,000 damage on their A1, Septimus who's critting for 350,000 damage, Mashald who is critting for 270,000 damage. No doubt in my mind, go straight for Leech. Use this to your advantage. Your runs will become a lot shorter. You will be doing a ton of damage in that short amount of period of time. So I think it's definitely worth playing around with, especially if you're really endgame. If you're early game, as mentioned before, do not consider Leech your saving grace. This is my opinion. This is what, from the numbers I've seen and I've played around with and tested in teams, this is what you should be expecting. Once again, I'm going to repeat, do not look for Leech to be your saving grace team if you think you can just throw in a Leech champion and get rid of all your lifesteal and expect higher results. From my Discord so far, I've had a bunch of people say they tried out Leech. They've lost between 10 to 12 million damage per key. These are people who were doing 30 million damage a key before that. They said maybe this could really push me over the edge and get to that 2 key, and ended up hurting them much more. Granted, they only tested 4 or 5 keys. It's not a big pool, but still, going back to my threshold, the amount of damage you can lose from Leech is a lot greater than just running lifesteal gear or trying to maximize your damage per minute. Keep that in mind when you're testing. If you test out Leech and your damage goes down way lower, it is very possible in the next 2 to 3 fights your damage could skyrocket and go through the roof if RNG aligns well with you. If that's a type of team you are interested in, I highly recommend pursuing this Leech team. Alright guys, as always, thanks a bunch for watching. I really appreciate the support. A lot of people asked me to get a video like this out, so I wanted to talk about Leech, make sure you had all the information you needed. As mentioned before, there are a ton of Leech champions. You can use someone like N3 Blood Twin. He has an A3, really hard-hitting champion. He's got the 100% Leech chance on a 3-turn cooldown, 2-turn duration. There are a bunch of epics who have Leech as well. You can definitely look into them. I highly recommend taking what I'm saying here into consideration if you are going to use a Leech team with an epic or someone like that. Make sure they have the stats and the kit that makes sense to use based on what you know now from watching this video. If you enjoy content like this where I go over my theory crafting, make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know what kind of Leech compositions you are going to try to run. I'm going to do my best to get to the comments, giving you my thoughts and opinions on if your team is going to work, if it's not going to work, what you can improve on. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next video that I drop. And until next time guys, peace out.